So in this video we are going to go into the code. Last two videos, first one was just a quick overview and a demonstration with us running down in expansion mode because we are expanding this hole. It was on a 5 block wide, I guess 11 altogether since there's 4 spokes, one in the middle, a 11 block wide hole. They're now expanded out to 13 blocks wide altogether. There's an extra drill on here. I was hoping that that would help us with this guide issue here. That was not the solution. The solution was the rotor. Anyway, that was the overview, and then the construction we went into a little bit more detailed of a tour. Looked at the actual building. But this time we're going to look at the code. And we are just going to leave this continuing to run and hopefully not fall into the bottom of the hole. We are going to go ahead and take a seat in the flight seat so that we don't get knocked off and start flying when the grids realign. But we're going to spend pretty much the whole episode here looking at the code in the Drill Manager programmable block. So first I just have some globals set up here that I do in all of my scripts so far. I haven't done a whole lot of them, but in all of my scripts so far I have a terminal text so that if I want to preserve some text in the terminal output I can save it onto here. And just get a tick counter to keep track of how many ticks we've been running so I can make sure and see that this is actually moving. Then we're declaring a whole bunch of variables for where we're going to store our various bits and pieces of the terminal blocks to manipulate them throughout the code. This is a global that we're keeping track of the change in cargo. So it says total cargo, really it's the total cargo per tick. Would have been a better name for it. And then these here are various flags that are again saved as globals so that they're preserved in between ticks. Determining which direction we're going. Walk down is starting off as false, so we're actually going up. Hold is set to true, so we're going to hold at the top by default when we come back up. Expansion set to true because we're in expand mode. This variable will eventually be switched over to false when we're done with the expansion so that we're not in that mode anymore. Assuming we don't just remove that feature entirely. Here's the instantiation of the program. This is all standard programmable block skeleton code. Starts off with the program constructor. Save constructor, or the save method rather. We don't actually use this, we're not saving anything. Might be a good idea to save the state at some point, but at the end of the day I don't think it's particularly dangerous to have when the game reloads for us to be going up and for us to be holding at the top. And like I said, I will eventually change expansion mode, so the point is that defaults are fine, so I don't save anything. And then the main argument, or the main method rather, that gets executed every tick. Program gets executed the first time, save gets executed when we save, obviously, and then main is executed every tick, and then below that there's just a whole bunch of helper functions, and we'll go through all those in turn. So anyway, the program constructor being the first one, most important one to get us going. Runtime update frequency update 100. This basically is a constant that causes the programmable block to rerun every 100 ticks. Used to be you needed to use a timer block. This is before my time. I didn't actually do any scripting at that point before they introduced this. I only started doing this in the full release update. So I've been using this the whole time. But yeah, so this runs now every 100 ticks. By default, don't need a timer block to restart it, don't need it to restart itself or anything like that. Initialize the terminal text to an empty string. Then we are saving the clamps. This is the landing gear. There's only 2 landing gear attached to the whole grid, so we only need the 2 there. But we are actually pulling them manually. But anyway, this is just instantiating them to an empty list. The pistons, the welders, the grinders, the drills, the merge blocks, the lock pistons, and the status panels. Everything else here, all these other variables up here that we're not instantiating into a list, we are just pulling as an individual block because we don't need to instantiate a list for those. First we get the clamps, landing gear 1, landing gear 2, then the pistons, piston 1, piston 2. Now that I do actually have a flight seat in here and there is a concrete orientation to this thing, I probably should set these to right and left rather than 1 and 2, just so that they're a little bit easier to remember which one's which, but that's not super critical to do soon. Are we stuck? I think we might be stuck. falling off the side. Yeah, we're stuck. Alright, so this is a situation that does happen sometimes, because we're not quite aligned. Looks like we're not too bad off side to side. What's probably going on here is we're tilted this way, on what would be, I guess, the roll axis, given the way we're lined up here. But that can usually be fixed. I say usually. Of course, I'm going to try it now. It's not going to work by just reversing the clamps. It'll try to push us down a little bit, but then it'll go back up, and hopefully it should get us unstuck. No, it did not get us unstuck. Super. Alright. Well, this video is going to end up running long because I have to tinker with this thing. The non-axis force is usually able to fix this, either by turning it down or turning it up. We'll see if this makes a difference. We just turned them both down so that it should be a little bit more flexible now. And nope, it's just going to break. Oh well. And I think I'm just going to restart this. So yeah, that went horribly wrong and we ended up at the bottom of the hole. I had decided to go ahead and trash that video and try to record it again, but then when I did record it again, I ended up screwing up the OBS hotkeys and not actually recording anything. So I decided to go ahead and make a blooper uh, video here. Although as much time as I spent editing this and figuring out how to use Shotcut to do my editing, I probably could have just re-recorded it. Anyway, you can see here we are trying to figure out what went horribly wrong and why the drill fell down to the bottom of the hole. Messing with the landing gear here. You may have noticed there real quick that the computer actually unlocked the gear, so when we switched to the other gear and unlocked it, we were no longer connected to anything, and then we fell down to the bottom of the hole again. It turns out that the problem was exceptionally obvious, but it took me a couple of tries to figure it out. Um, we will see when that comes up here. There is a very good and very specific reason why the piston is not extending like it's supposed to. Herpa-derp, there it is. Yeah, so the brackets that we've been complaining about for the last couple episodes is not really being useful because it's the rotor torque that was jerking us off the guide rails is very much in the way because we moved a little bit there, so now it's colliding with the piston for the merge block and is no longer allowing the drill head to come up. So I'm going to go ahead and take those brackets off and clean up some of the mess on the bottom. Of course, you will see in the next video that the mess is still there because, well, reasons. No spoilers. Um, so yeah, we're cleaning up these brackets that are supposed to be helping kind of keep us on those guide rails, but are not really serving their purpose. Instead, they're just colliding with things and angering Clang. I am still going to do the code review, um, but I figured I needed to learn how to edit videos because OBS doesn't really seem to do a whole lot of that. Now when we take this side off, we are having some piston extension problems. Since we were colliding with the top of the scaffold there, stuff was actually breaking off, and we fell down to the bottom of the hole. Recurring theme, as I mentioned. I have cut out some of the loading here just because load time tends to take a really long time, and I don't really have as much to say about that, so just let that go. Now we will remove the block again, and we'll remove it a little bit more intelligently so it doesn't fall down to the bottom of the hole. Of course, that therefore means we're not going to clean up the mess that's down there, but that's not really important. So we're getting those brackets out of the way so they're no longer colliding with the locking piston. And going ahead and taking off the other one too, because if it's not causing a problem yet, it probably will eventually. Of course, that is not quite enough to fix our alignment issues. I don't know if you saw there, the connector is not lined up enough to be connectable. So we're going to turn the merge blocks on manually. On the drill head first, and then on the scaffold next. And I'm forgetting an important step here, but I'll figure it out eventually. This is, I'm doing a post commentary now, so I'm well aware of all the mistakes that I made. Doesn't quite reach because we are that far out of alignment. The other merge block is not even lined up, so it's not connecting either, even though it is buttered up against the drill head, so that has to be reversed so that it's not binding. And then we will extend the maximum limit of this piston, get ourselves a connection. Doesn't need the full extra block, but give it to it anyway. It only took another meter. That is now connected. But landing gears are both actually unlocked right now, I think. At least one of them was. Just tried to unlock both of them. Connector is not connected. Pistons. This is the piston we're trying to use to jerk it back into alignment. It's stuck. It's not going where it's supposed to go. Who knows why? Oh, that's right, because the computer's still on, so it is trying to lock things. Turn that off so that it doesn't try to override what I'm trying to do. Still not going to have a whole lot of luck here because we are binding. I haven't figured out yet where we're binding, at least in the video I have now, of course. I've got everything put back together. But the issue is that one of our walking pistons is binding up against the scaffold. It's not binding hard enough to actually break it this time, but it is binding hard enough to keep the drill head from being pulled back into position by the locking clamp. But if we set the max limit to 5 and just reverse it back and forth a couple times, it will drag itself across. I'm lucky I didn't break something here. But we are connected by a merge block, so it would be hard to completely break it. Far enough. And we'll go and connect the other merge clamp, locking clamp, merge block, whatever things. Now that is connected up. Now we see the problem with the piston. So we go ahead and reverse that back down. And now we are more or less safe. We just need to turn the computer back on. Before we do that though, I think I mentioned in a previous video, I did have these both set to a maximum distance of 3 meters because that was supposed to be good enough to protect the top of the scaffold from being beaten by them given the height of the connector, but clearly that didn't work, so we'll give it 2.5 meters instead. And then we'll turn the computer back on, everything will lock up. And we will see that our cargo is now unloading like it's supposed to. And we are in hold. Everything's fine. That's it. I will make the proper video soon-ish, somewhat.